Well, welcome. It is 2024. Yay. Oh boy. I think we all deserve participation trophies or something at this point. We hate it.
We survived, but it's cold out there.
It is very cold out there. I feel like Santa Fe has become a true mountain town this week. So hence we got the fire going and we're sitting down. But yeah, you're looking
appropriately dressed.
It's a good hat, David. It's a good hat.
I think it's a good look for you. We have a lot to cover. 2023 ended in kind of a slowdown, right?
Yes.
It's kind of skidded towards the end, a little bit more so than normal. But there was a lot of predictions last year that we had made about pricing, inventory, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to revisit those for a second because for better and for worse, I think you can give yourself a pat on the back, David, because you were pretty on point. If I recall, your prediction was that prices would increase a little bit.
Just a little bit, yes.
But sales would drop a little bit.
I think we saw about a 10-12% decline in sales.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And your instincts were that on the higher end that we'd see some steady sales, and it was at the lower sort of price point that we'd see some stagnation. And again, I think you nailed it. So at the end of this, I look forward to hearing what your predictions are.
It's like you've been doing this for a while, David.
Every now and then, I manage to get it right. Just like myself.
Yeah. So anyways, so we have a bunch of topics to cover here. So first, I want to just do a little housekeeping. One thing that we were trying to be better about last year was engaging more in the community with our brokers and so forth, especially coming out of COVID. So I just want to read off a quick list of all the organizations that we either supported financially or with volunteer hours or doing the drives like the one for Espanola Bienvenidos here. So we have the Espanola Humane Society, Museum of New Mexico Foundation, Silver Bullet Productions, Life Circle, Santa Fe Children's Museum, the El Dorado Arts and Crafts Association, Tomorrow's Women, Santa Fe Striders, Thrive Community School Foundation, the New Mexico Gay Rodeo Association, the Alzheimer's Association, Lensic 360 Music, Santa Fe Century, Kitchen Angels, Cancer Foundation of New Mexico, Bienvenidos, and then the El Ranchito Orphanage. So that's a pretty stellar list, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't we also hit youth shelters and family services?
Yes, we also did that as well. Yeah. So quite a few.
That is awesome. What I love is the culture within our office where we have so many participating brokers for whom it is very important that they participate and they get the office involved and bring everybody together in a camaraderie and a lot of esprit de corps to really help these organizations, which are truly the backbone of our community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think working in real estate, at the end of the day, whether or not you see it up front, like you are the ambassador in a lot of ways for a lot of people coming to town, right? If you're coming from the outside, we're oftentimes the first person you might come in contact with. If you're leaving town, it's kind of the same thing. It's like you want to make sure you leave on a good note, right? And so, being involved in these organizations, I think is so critical.
Well, they do so much for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Outside of that, Laura, David, I kind of want to punt this to you guys. There was the bill that was, not bill. There was
the mansion tax.
The mansion tax vote that came and went since we last sat down on video. So what's the feedback there?
The vote, as I recollect, was not very close.
No.
I think the citizenship spoke loudly and clearly. I think it was 74% approval.
In favor of it, yeah.
And that will take effect in May, a 3% tax charged on the excess of any residential sales within the city limits over $1 million. So if you're out in the county, you're not subject to that tax.
So that's like Las Campanas, Tesuque, things like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right.
And the way the bill was written, the tax is supposedly to be paid by the buyer. Think of it as an investment in the community. That's our take on it. Mm-hmm. What do you think the reality when it comes to actual sales transactions is going to be, Laura?
I think there's going to be some negotiation.
About who pays it?
About who pays it. I think buyers who are coming into the community, are new to the community, are not necessarily going to feel as obligated to pay that tax, and they're, it's going to be another thing that's probably going to be an out-of-pocket expense.
Mm-hmm.
So
What do you think it's going to do to city sales versus sales in the county? Do you think it'll really have an impact?
yeah, gosh, yeah, I think it will. I think we have a large proportion of our $1 million plus properties are in the county. And so I think
Yes.
that people, once they're made aware of that mansion tax, are going to think, well, maybe we should certainly look out in the county where there is a good inventory of properties there. So yeah, I think it will, and I think there will be negotiations between buyer and seller regarding who gets to
Not
pay
who pays
that.
it.
Yeah.
What is your prediction about how long it'll take before the county enacts some kind of similar legislation?
About 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I think they're already thinking about it.
I'm sure they
I
are.
think before they enact it, no, not 5 minutes, maybe 10 or 15, because they will move a little more slowly. But I think it's going to be very similar to the short-term rental ordinance issue. You know, the city had it for a while. County looked at it and said, oh, gee, we should do that. And I think they're going to...
And they imposed a 1-year moratorium on that before they were
did.
finally able to pass it.
Yeah.
Now it is enacted.
Yep. Yep.
I want to touch base a little bit on the spirit of the law, right? The idea is it's to help put some more funds towards affordable housing,
Yes.
which we all agree is like
Absolutely.
in dire need, right? And so, you know, in our sense, like, you know, we embrace seeing the city and the voters in this case,
Yes.
trying to be proactive about trying to address that. I want to touch a little bit on that because I think at the end of the day, and this will be in the written report, like the inventory is still the story. I mean, I think if there's one takeaway from these conversations, it's like inventory, right?
Yes.
And so for those of you at home looking at the report that we're providing inside, there's going to be a graph that shows 10 years of inventory and sales in Santa Fe County. And it is a dramatic trend line. I mean, it's not like, oh, how do I interpret this? It's pretty straightforward.
Yes.
Right? So the squeeze between available inventory and home sales at one point was narrowed to the point where they're almost equal.
Yes.
Home came up for sale, it sold. Like that was it. There was no floating inventory. So obviously that had an impact on pricing. And it continues to be the challenge regarding affordable homes, correct?
That is correct. You know, the government is trying to have an impact on that, but the reality is the market forces are the strongest out there. And it always comes down to supply and demand. The more supply we have, the diminishment in pricing and the pressure on pricing going down will take place. We don't have that. And what happens with the city? They keep adopting more stringent building codes, which dramatically drive the price of construction up. We're starting to see more new construction, and that is what is really going to help this community. While we like that from the standpoint of keeping prices at a reasonable level, every time you see a proposal for a new project, whether it's apartments or a new land subdivision, what do you see in the newspapers?
Opposition.
A lot of opposition.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We're concerned about the density. So, you know, there are really a lot of arguments out there, pro and con, but the reality is very much we need affordable housing for people in this community.
Yeah, and ultimately the market forces almost always outstrip the ability of governments to try to make some corrections. And so
Yes.
it's this cat and mouse game that unfortunately plays out in so many other parts of our society, let's be honest. Well, and there in other sort of components, right? Like the real estate industry also has been in the headlines quite a bit, right? There's been lawsuits, there's been antitrust, and so forth that have been kind of percolating across the nation. I don't know if you have some sort of perspective on that you want to provide folks.
I think it's fascinating, and to be honest, I think some of these things are probably long overdue. I think there has not been a lot of change in our industry for many years. And I think what we have is a groundswell of concern about what is the value of the services that a real estate broker brings to a transaction. I think that's what we all have to ask ourselves very carefully. And that we have to have thorough conversations and communicate that to the clients, the buyers and sellers that we're working with. I think there are a lot of issues that came out of these lawsuits about questions that came up where there was not clarity on these items. Certainly commissions are negotiable, always have been. There were accusations of conspiracies and things of that nature, and I really haven't seen where that played out. But there are very legitimate concerns, and I think our industry has been previously slow to respond to these issues, but I think now it's gotten everybody's attention. I think things are starting to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Gabs, I'm curious from like your perspective, because you're so much on the operations side, like I guess from my where I'm sitting, I look at it as an opportunity to kind of help people understand what we do, right?
Right.
It's like, what do we do with our brokers that are different, perhaps?
Well, I think it's can be a scary thought for brokers around the community because it's something new, right? But like you, I see it as a huge opportunity to do a better job and provide a better service, right? So what I'm thinking now is, as a client, or whether it be buyer or seller, you really want to do your due diligence not just with the house or the property that you're buying, but with the broker that you're working with, right? You want to ask those questions that, about the commission. How do you get paid? Or what sets you apart from the other brokers in this community? I think that's a huge question. What are you going to do that's different than, this broker or this brokerage? And so I think both buyers and sellers need to be thinking about those questions as we move forward, because this is going to force us as an industry to be so much more professional, which I think is exciting.
Yes.
I think it's an exciting time in real estate to be able to raise that bar and provide a better service to the customer.
Yeah, I think about, you two sitting here, right? Two qualifying brokers within our office, and you as well. But also like our transaction coordinator program, right? There's importance to not just the broker, but also the client, of knowing that there's an extra set of eyes on that transaction,
absolutely.
right? It's an emotional, a lot of money, things go wrong, right? And
there's a lot involved these days. The contracts themselves can be sometimes very lengthy, depending on, all of the contingencies that may go along with it. So it's a lot of material for one person to go through. So you need to have that level of support. And I think that's one of those questions you should ask a broker is, what support systems do you have to help with this? Because it's a lot for one person. So to have that second set of eyes and somebody helping along the process, effectively, you build like a team, a support team around what this client's needs are, so that they get.
How long is a purchase agreement?
They start at 22 pages.
Yeah.
They start at 22
They start at 22 pages.
How long is a listing agreement?
15, 16
I was gonna
pages?
say 16,
And
but yeah.
then, hey, if there's a septic tank, you're adding 3 pages.
Right.
If there's a,
Counter offers,
Well,
Again, I'm just like kind of, back to the industry. It's like, it's interesting because on one side, yes, during like the run up, I feel like things were moving so quick. People lost sight of what goes into making a successful, home purchase.
Yes.
But it's a complicated matter these days. And with the prices have gone up so much, it's like you want that extra due diligence, right?
Well, and that's, these lawsuits have brought this to the forefront, as we said. And I think it's important for buyers and sellers to be asking these questions, but a lot of times they don't know what questions to ask. It is our job to explain, to be completely transparent, and to explain what we do and how we get compensated and what our value is and what we bring to the table. So I think it's a two-way street, and I think we're all becoming more aware of exactly what we need to do as brokers.
That's a good point.
Absolutely.
The industry has changed so much. I remember when I got started in the 70s, we had a one-page purchase agreement that had language in it saying, buyer beware.
Right.
And nowadays, it's not uncommon, Laura, right, to get a sewer line scope. That hardly ever happened before.
No, we have,
There's a lot that goes in. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it now, right? A lot more scrutiny, I should say.
Well, and we have inspectors for everything.
Yeah.
We have a 5-page guide to inspection assessment that we provide for our buyers.
Right.
And that doesn't even cover all of them. It's but it's a fairly extensive list. Yes.
I was laughing out loud at the closing table looking at all the disclosure docs now with
You
the
just
mortgage.
went through this.
Right. I just went through it personally and I was laughing. I was just like, this has gotten crazy, right? And, that's the Dodd-Frank stuff that came after the,
Right after
the crash and everything like that, which had to happen, but it's made this a lot more complicated than it used to be. So anyway,
How was your experience in your real estate transaction, Kyle?
it was pretty exciting, actually. It was a good reminder for us, right,
Yes.
in the roles that we're in, of both the emotion and the financial components to it. Like when you're in it every day, you kind of lose sight of that. And boy, it was a challenging and emotional experience. And it's funny because I'm so grateful for our TCs who caught things that even I missed, right? And whatnot. So
They come in handy.
no, they do. And, and honestly, one of the big components that was really beneficial to us is all the education we do within the office.
Yes.
Because a number of things that propped up in my personal deal were things that we had covered already in our educational, every Friday we do education for our brokers. And so, anyways, my point is, it takes a lot to make these things seem seamless.
Yes.
Right. And so anyways, it's an exciting time to be in the industry. Let's just end it on that note. We'll see where the rest of this year goes. But I want to get to sort of the numbers and talking about what's happening in our local real estate market. We touched on inventory a little bit, and just so people know, like nationally, the trough, the bottom of the barrel was after the crash. There was no new construction permits at that. I mean, it was the bottom of the barrel after like 40 years, right? It was horrible. And then recovery was very slow. And so I've also included, that'll be included in the market report going out. So of course you have that going on. But one of the other interesting things that is kind of shocking to me is back in 2005, the average duration between home purchases and moves for folks was 6.5 years. So it's kind of that 7-year itch thing, right? It was like, all right, we got to get up and go.
And it'd been that way for quite a long time.
It'd been that way for decades. And then from then on, it increased, topping out eventually in 2020. Imagine that, people couldn't move. In 2020 to 13.5 years between moves. So getting back to the previous point, it's important to stay on, to work with people who know what's happening, because 13.5 years between potential purchases, a lot can change.
Yes.
But my bigger point is thinking about inventory. So people aren't moving as much. That has doubled, and that's going to put constraints on inventory.
Absolutely.
Right?
Sure.
Let's talk about.
But the biggest constraint on inventory really has to do with interest rates, don't you think?
I mean, yes and no.
I think interest rates affect buyers first, and then with buyers not able to buy, people aren't wanting to put their homes on the market. So I think inventory is affected by interest rates, but not necessily directly.
Or someone's locked in at 2.9%.
That's my point.
And they're
That's
unwilling to give it up because the cost of the servicing the mortgage is so low, right? I mean, the amount of people that are hanging on to a mortgage that is that low is remarkable. So now you have that on top of this sort of trend anyways of not moving as much. Boy, inventory challenge is just...
And yet inventory is increasing.
It is.
We're delighted to see that. Our inventory numbers are up now significantly from where they were a year or two ago.
Right. And even over the last couple of weeks, I was surprised to see over the holidays, obviously you don't have a lot of activity, but the first 2 weeks of January, boop, 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 inventory started coming right back on. We saw a bunch go under contract right away. It was like, okay, I guess we're going to start this year kind of hot, which is not, again, what you're expecting when you look at the news headlines. We ended the year with the average, the average price had dropped. So the average price had dropped a little bit towards the end of the year. Inventory was slightly up. Average days on market has remained relatively stable. What's the consensus here? What's going on?
Well, winter for starters.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, no one wants to move during the holidays. We know,
No one wants to move during the holidays. Younger families tend to wait until summer because of the school year. I think that slows things down. But yeah, we have seen some optimism.
Yeah.
We have seen interest rates coming down a little bit. We have predictors that are saying they're going to come down maybe a little bit more. And I think that's encouraging people to think about buying. Maybe people who, first-time home buyers, but I think we're seeing a good head of steam in the luxury market So it's, I think people, we're still coming out of COVID, folks.
Yeah.
we're still starting to feel that optimism. We're still starting to see people wanting to buy second homes and retirement homes. That's what I think. How about you?
You know, I just am very optimistic for 2024. I think we've seen 2 years of declining sales in our market, and I think 2024 is going to turn that corner where we see an increase in transactions. The fact that inventory is already up during this time of year is, I think, bodes very well. Seasonally, we always see a significant inventory increase in the summer months, so I look forward to that. And I see a lot more activity out there in terms of new construction. And I think with interest rates softening a little bit, I think that's giving a lot of hope to builders and to buyers. They might not be in the market right now, but I think they're starting to focus on getting into the market this summer or fall as interest rates start to drop more.
Yeah, I want to touch base a little bit on the building side because you brought that up.
Yes.
We have seen quite a bit of new building permits in Santa Fe, haven't we?
There has been a good increase in building permits.
And
And that's not just the apartment projects. There are a lot of those going on, which really help affordability. But we're starting to see a lot more construction of single-family residences. A lot of that tends to be on the higher end of the market, but we've got some large volume builders taking place in the south and the west parts of Santa Fe.
Well, and to speak to that, one of the sort of graphs I like to, share with you guys behind the scenes on all this was median price growth, which parts of town, and they were all on the edges of town.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting, and I can't help but think it's one, there's just not a lot of inventory in town. There's obviously that challenge, but two is there's more construction going on now at these other, the periphery of town. Is that safe to say?
That absolutely, that is true, and that's where the opportunities are. I mean, to do it effectively from a cost perspective, you want to have a large enough piece of ground where you can divide up into smaller parcels and be able to deliver a house at an affordable price. So that's what builders and developers are really looking for. You can't find that in town, so you really have to get on the outskirts.
And land is less expensive when you get outside of town.
Well, of course.
So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of land, I'm just pulling that up here on my screen. Land might be the most steady thing in the real estate market right now. I mean, it's been steady Eddie for the full year. It hasn't really, prices haven't really changed that much.
Not much change there.
Days on market hasn't changed that much. The inventory hasn't changed that much. So it's not that there's a lot of people buying this. It's just more of the stuff that's been sat on for a while is starting to see, applications of building finally, right? That's the big change. Because there's not a lot of sales in land at this moment. It's also winter.
It's winter.
It's winter. Right.
It's winter.
That dirt's hard and covered in snow.
Yeah.
Totally understood.
Hard to find those property corners.
Yeah, exactly. On the luxury side, you brought this up. Luxury saw at the end of last year, it saw a fairly heavy glut of inventory come in.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we saw almost a direct relationship to pricing as well. So on the luxury side, we actually saw prices come down as more enter that market. I'm curious, looking at this year, where do you think that direction is going to go? Are we going to see more or less price increase, price decrease?
What do you think, Laura?
Well, interesting. I think a lot of luxury sales are still cash. And so interest rates aren't necessarily affecting that. I think we're seeing more optimism among the luxury buyers. And hey, we're still a destination market here.
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm going to think that we're going to see a little bit of an increase.
I think we've seen a lot more optimism from luxury sellers compared to other parts of the market. I think that is a part of the market where prices went up much more rapidly. And I think those were sellers who were very optimistic about what sort of price their property might fetch. And in that, through this natural exuberance, I think some of those price points were overshot, and they need to come back down to a little more reasonable level for those sales to take place. But all in all, I think our luxury market in 2024 will be very strong. Buyers are going to be very picky. They're going to be very selective, and boy, are they going to be thorough with their inspections.
Oh, yeah, well, all across the board, buyers are being very thorough with their inspections, as they should be.
Well, so I wanted to ask you, Gabs, on this because you're in the weeds with the transaction.
Yes.
What are you seeing? Because like I get the sense that while prices have remained pretty steady, it's not. You can't just say it across the board. It seems to be property by property that you're seeing quite a bit of variation. What are you seeing there in terms of the transactions? Are people terminating? Are there concessions? What's happening?
So we're back to seeing, in some cases, multiple offers and backup offers.
Interesting.
And even multiple backup offers. But what seems to be a theme is buyers obviously don't have a ton of buying power right now. So they're kind of putting all their eggs into one basket, right? So unless they're getting into a property that's absolutely perfect, that they don't need to do anything to, it doesn't need any renovations. If they can get into a perfect property, they're good to go. But if there needs to be any updates or renovations, repairs, anything like that, it's a lot harder for them to get into that house. And if you have a seller on the other side of that who still wants that top dollar they were seeing during the pandemic, you have some friction there. And so with the sellers who are starting to see what the trends are and starting to give a little bit more in that regard, they're seeing some success in those closings. But the ones who aren't willing to budge, those will sometimes fall out and go under contract multiple times.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's, if sellers can give a little bit right now to the buyers because they're in such a hard situation with their lack of buying power, I think the better off they are in some cases.
Yeah, you're always playing that risk game, right? Of like you're trying to achieve top dollar, but at the same time, you also need to move forward with your life. And it can be really stressful coming in and out of contract and elongating something like that for over months.
Exactly.
Perhaps, right? So I think that's good advice. It's like be a little human in the transaction, right?
Well, one transaction's hard enough. I don't want to go through 4.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a good point. Other sort of interesting data points this year. We talked about interest rates. We talked about them softening. I'm seeing everything ranging from like the best rates getting near the 6% number and the more average rates 6.5 to 8 or 7. Does anyone get a sense that the Feds aren't going to move fast on this? This is going to be a really slow drop in interest rates. It's not like going to happen in March where it's like a point lower or something.
No, I think it needs to be a slow drop.
No, I agree. Is that the sense that we think it's going to be a pretty slow?
I think it's going to be slow and steady. I don't think we'll see any interest rate drops until the middle of the year. I don't think we'll see interest rates hit the 5s this year.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be very cautious to make sure inflation doesn't come looming back.
Right.
The last thing we want is to be too aggressive, lowering interest rates, have inflation return, because second round, the Fed will be really tough if that happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing that we've talked about in the past is the effect of the election years. So I went back and actually researched this. And I'm going to challenge the notion that, because I've heard it, I've repeated it, right? That election years have an effect on market. I went back and looked. I don't see a relationship.
Really?
I do not. And so in years where the trend line was going up and there was an election, it continued going, it didn't change. In the years it was going down, same thing. In fact, out of the last 4 elections, every single one of those years had the stronger of the 4 years.
I suppose with the election results and pending election, maybe the motivation is those who are really optimistic are deciding they need to make a move and a decision quicker. And those who are feeling a little bit pessimistic and fear is their motivation, they might have the same feeling. They need to make a decision more quickly.
Yeah, it's hard to say what drives that. I think there's probably some subconscious there. But it's funny because we've always said election years are challenging.
Yes.
And certainty breeds people not wanting. And the reality of the numbers is not true. And it tells me that what it is we're feeling it when we're working with clients, the uncertainty, right?
Yes.
So the decisions have been made, but the actual, the emotional side is probably what changes. So anyways, I thought that was an interesting data point to share with everyone.
So I'm curious, Kyle, you're the fellow that spends all kinds of time studying technology and IT. We're certainly seeing lots of changes in the world with that. How do you think that's going to impact real estate in 2024?
Boy, yeah, it's there's a lot of things to unpack when it comes to how technology and the internet is impacting our industry. And actually, like, let's be honest, like, we need to be focusing on the client experience,
Yes.
right? So that's where I think it has the biggest impact. I was in Austin not that long ago, meet with some other industry leaders to have these discussions. And what came out of it was kind of two camps. There's this really sort of tech forward thinking of technology is going to solve all of our problems and we can do everything online. You can have an online avatar as a real estate broker and yada, yada. And then there's this other sort of camp that is like, this is a lot of money. This is a lot of motion. There's a lot of moving parts, boots on the ground that you need someone to help guide you through, right? And I always kind of waver. I think there's room for a lot of these tools to help people have a more transparent, a more smooth transaction and learn more about their property. I always think about like an inspection report,
Yes.
right? An inspection report now comes back as a link. It's a live link. It has a lot of resources. It's easy to decipher instead of a stack of papers with pictures that were taken on a potato, right? So now you have like high definition images. You got video sometimes. You have real important information that's like a manual to your home. That's new, right? That's only been a handful of years that this has come. So there's a lot of interesting opportunity there. What I'm more concerned about though is this move towards brokerages that don't have a lot of hands-on sort of oversight and experience. Like
Yes.
that's a bit concerning to me, not just from like a local level, which I think it does have an impact on, but on just a professional level
Yes.
of, there's a lot that can go wrong. And I would prefer if that person was available like down the hall, or someone I could go talk to face, or who has experience with, let's say, that plumber or whatever, or, I went to high school with the builder. Like those are all important things that I think really make a very successful real estate transaction and real estate broker. And some of these models, while they're very efficient on the financial side for the curators of it,
Yes.
I don't think they're in the best interest of the clients. And so there's got to be a happy middle ground. And so it's like, look at all the tech options out there and pick the ones that work and stay grounded in what works, right? So it's like, be willing to experiment, but go back to basics.
Well, you look back over the past 5 years or so, and you can certainly see lots of instances of major real estate brokerages coming out with new solutions where they've got the magic pill. They've got exactly the right kind of software program to make everything smooth and easy and solve all the problems. And they've invested hundreds of millions of dollars, but I'm not sure that any of those have really had a significant impact or improvement in the industry.
Right.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Back in the year 2000, we had just moved into this building.
Yes.
I was walking down this hall behind me here towards my office, and you were coming out of your office, and I said, is something to the effect of, is the internet gonna put us all out of business? And you said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, it's gonna be a great tool, and we're gonna have to learn to use it, but we are still going to be the heart and soul of this business.
Yes.
We're going to need to use it, but we gotta be present.
Well,
So-
and to your point, like I'll just give you the simplest example of how this comes into play. You joke about the home that I just purchased, right?
Yes.
And in that scenario, the area that I made the purchase that ultimately we decided on was an area I had never considered, but because the broker knew what I was looking for in the sense of like, experience and all that, it was funny because it came to me as like, there's no way I would have looked for that myself. And I think those are the weird nuances that get lost sometimes when you're spending a lot of time on Zillow or whatever,
Yes.
which, all of us do.
Yes.
There's a lot of the je ne sais quoi, right? The what you don't know until you're there, right? That is hard to put a value on. And in my case, it was like, wow, I feel very fortunate because I found somewhere that to me is like a dream. And if it wasn't for that relationship with that broker, I would have never known, right? So anyways, it's going to be a fascinating year on the technology
Yes, it
side.
is.
I'm somewhat excited about it, but I also think about things like blockchain, where it was like, oh, this is going to solve title and we won't need title anymore. Wrong, right? So there's changes, there's threats of changes, and then there's the fundamentals of what matters, which is taking care of people,
Yes.
right? And that will never change. Okay, predictions. The fun stuff, the meat and potatoes here.
Okay.
Okay, 2024, what are our predictions? What do you think is going to happen with pricing? What do you think going to happen with overall sort of sales rate? What's going to happen with interest rates? Yada yada. Spit out. What do you think? What's happening this year?
And interest rates will drop about a half a point over the course of the year. Transaction numbers will increase by a factor of around 10%. And in terms of average price, median price, it's a little hard and oftentimes deceiving, because you'll have instances where the high-end luxury market is starting to impact and have more sales, resulting in a significant increase in that median price. I think prices are going to go up modestly, maybe up to 5% this year. That's on the optimistic side. Other than that, I think pricing-wise, we're going to be relatively flat.
Laura, do you agree with that?
What he said.
Perfect. Gabs, what do you think?
I agree. I think that some buyers are waiting to unthaw right now during the winter. And with the high demand that Santa Fe has, even if the interest rates come down a little bit, there's still a ton of people trying to get here. So I don't think we're going to see a decrease in prices. If there's any change, it'll be a slight increase. But like David said, I think it's going to be fairly flat.
Let's see.
An opposer.
No, I don't think I'm in opposition. I think what's going to happen is, I think, last year we talked about rebalancing of the market, needed more inventory, and it was going to help with pricing where they stopped skyrocketing and start leveling out. And I think we saw that for the most part. I think this year is going to be a return to almost 2019 levels in terms of balance. What I mean by that is a reasonable amount of inventory, right? Pricing relatively flat, and days on market fluttering between 50 and 60 days. I think that's really possible, and it'll look like this on the chart, right? It'll just kind of be these little blips, and of course in summer we're going to see the big swing in inventory and everything like that. But I think on average we're going to end the year pricing very similar to where we are now. Maybe more transactions, more inventory, but as a whole it's just going to be a little bit healthier. Well, great. In 3 months, we'll see how wrong we are right then. That's right. There's that. And stay warm out there, everyone.
Yeah, put your hat on.
Nippy.
Yeah. Don't forget your hat, David.
Good. All right. Thank you all.
Good meeting. Thank you.
Good.